Hey everyone, it's Mike. I review nootropics and talk personal development, and during this video today I'm going to talk about my preferred limitless nootropic stack. It looks like modafinil, it looks like phenylpiracetam, it has alpha GPC, I've got Oxiracetam, Aniracetam, and Pramiracetam, and I will use Rhodiola, Rosea, and lion's mane. And now I'll get into why I use them, what they're good for, and I'll talk about when during the day and the particular amount. So first thing in the morning, what that looks like is taking 50 milligrams of phenylpiracetam along with 100 milligrams of modafinil. Then usually I'll go about my whole morning routine, I'll get a workout in, I'll do some work, and somewhere about like 5 hours afterwards, I will go ahead and I'll take another dose of phenylpiracetam. I prefer 50 milligrams. I'll take the Racetams, the four which I mentioned prior, at doses like 500 milligrams of Oxiracetam and Aniracetam, 300 milligrams of Pramiracetam, and then I will use Alpha GPC, about 200 milligrams typically. Now the next nootropic would be Rhodiola Rosea, again in the early afternoon and later afternoon. I like 300 milligrams. And then of course we have lion's mane. I'm using it similar to Rhodiola Rosea in like a dose early afternoon and then a dose in the later afternoon of 300 milligrams. And then sometime later in the day, perhaps 4 hours afterwards, I will use all those nootropics except for phenylpiracetam and modafinil. And I may use caffeine and L-theanine just depending on the day. So how I use this stack, it's specifically for one of those days when I really just want to jumpstart things. I don't always recommend it on like a Monday, because on a Monday, you're kind of catching up with work from the prior week as well as like setting up your week and setting up your calendar. So for instance, like on a Wednesday, Thursday, when you just need to get like a nice rejuvenation and it may be a day when you're somewhat sleep deprived, that's where the stack could be really good and just set you up overall for having a great day and next couple of days. But I also like that this stack is kind of designed around making modafinil work, because for those of you modafinil users, you probably know that it's horribly inconsistent. You'll have some modafinil days when you're very good, you're very productive, and you're in that state to really be the most resourceful you. But then there's those bad modafinil days when you pretty much feel overstimulated, jittery, not like yourself, and like the last thing you want to do is talk to anybody. So if there were one nootropic that I would not want to take out of the stack, it would be modafinil. Modafinil is the most important thing, because modafinil is going to get you the focus, the energy, the concentration. But then without the rest of these nootropics, then it's pretty much like a gamble using modafinil. Whereas with modafinil, you seem to get like 8 to 10 hours of productivity followed by a crash, where I can find that phenylpiracetam can to some extent offset that. With phenylpiracetam, it seems to work stronger in the later portion of the day, like after 4 hours of initial ingestion. So that's why I'm enjoying phenylpiracetam. That can be very overstimulating in itself, so that's why I prefer taking like a very small dose first thing in the morning with the modafinil, and then again later in the afternoon. So that's the modafinil. It's just 100 milligrams. Again, first thing in the morning. Make sure you're hydrating throughout the day, and if anything, make sure you're using more choline versus less through alpha GPC or other choline sources like CDP choline or choline bitartrate, or if anything, then just use a choline-rich diet. Okay, otherwise with phenylpiracetam, what that dosage looks like is 50 milligrams again in the morning, and then in the second dose of nootropics during the day, you'll use phenylpiracetam again. For those of you that have a tough time dealing with insomnia and not being able to fall asleep, be very mindful of that. The way I would introduce phenylpiracetam to my stack is just having it like the earlier the better, the lower the dose the better, and just go from there. Because it's been my experience that sometimes it's phenylpiracetam which is keeping me awake and not the modafinil. So why I like these two powerful nootropics low dose together is specifically again because of the energy, the alertness, the overall stimulation, and you'll find that you really don't need as much coffee or caffeine as you're used to getting. Like for those of you people that are drinking a lot of coffee or taking a lot of caffeine, or maybe caffeine and L-theanine, you can definitely reduce your intake on a day like this just to avoid being overstimulated, because if not, then that's what's going to happen. So where I find phenylpiracetam shines where modafinil doesn't is with phenylpiracetam, it reduces anxiety, whereas with modafinil, it kind of increases anxiety. And with phenylpiracetam, you're getting the physical energy that you typically wouldn't get from modafinil. Alright, with respect to the Racetams, I won't go them individually in depth, but I've done that over here in this video where I talk about nootropics that help me double my income. That's a true story. But really, in a nutshell, what the Racetams are is they're very subtle. They're not as noticeable as things like caffeine, phenylpiracetam, or modafinil. But what they're going to do is just gently improve things like your memory, your motivation, your energy levels, and they can work in different ways. For instance, Aniracetam is better in like a social context. For those of you that are somewhat engaged in conversations in a daily basis, or maybe you're going to meetings. Whereas Oxiracetam, that's good for general alertness and staying sharp. Pramiracetam, you'll find this is the nootropic that will make you somewhat like a workhorse. You're able to work on repetitive tasks again and again. It can somewhat reduce your emotions in a good way so you can deal with the consistency of tasks and just really embrace like repetitious boredom. Because in a lot of cases, boredom equals money and boredom equals productivity, but we sometimes lack the discipline and the willpower in order for us to go through the proper tasks. So it's 500 milligrams of Oxiracetam, 500 milligrams of Aniracetam, 300 milligrams of Pramiracetam, and the next would be Alpha GPC, which again is a nootropic that works very well with modafinil. I almost find like I don't want modafinil unless I'm having Alpha GPC, because without Alpha GPC, I'm most likely going to experience headaches and some of those modafinil side effects. What Alpha GPC is good for, it's just going to give you like a general boost. You'll find that if you're somebody that gets tired after like 8 hours of work, you'll find that if you're using Alpha GPC throughout the whole day, you'll be able to work like 10 hours. You're just kind of lit up. It's like you've added some extra batteries, and I've talked about it in depth. I think that everybody should try some sort of a choline source. For me, Alpha GPC is something I would be using almost every single day of the year, on those days without modafinil, on those days without the Racetams. I just find that I can function a lot better, and I've not found that it has any side effects. But I must admit, there are some people that report side effects with Alpha GPC if they take too much. So for that reason, the way I've described it in this video is I'll just use it like twice a day, once in the afternoon at 200 milligrams, and then in the later serving of nootropics afterwards, I'll take 200 milligrams, sometimes a little bit more, just depending on how I'm feeling and depending on how much work I have going on in the later portion of the day. But for those of you that are like me and you exercise, maybe you lift weights, that's where Alpha GPC is a very strong supplement, especially for those of you looking to build muscle. There's evidence showing that it can somewhat increase your growth hormone, and it can also help you with your power output. So to push more reps or push more weight and just generally have a progressive overload, which is what you want if your goal is to achieve more muscle mass. Now, the next nootropic would be Rhodiola Rosea. Again, in the early afternoon and later afternoon, I like 300 milligrams. And what it's good for is, it's like the nap in a pill. You feel somewhat refreshed. You're able to forget any of the crap which happened beforehand, any bad instances. You'll find this immediate effect after you ingest Rhodiola in most cases, that you feel centered, you feel present, you're able to be productive again, and you kind of treat the day almost like it's a new day. It's commonly asked on this channel what form of Rhodiola Rosea that I like the most, and that would be this form here. This is from Nootropics Depot. It's the 3% salidroside, and they recommend 250 milligrams. I'm taking 300 milligrams, and I prefer it actually in powder form just because I can adjust the dosage to my liking. Here's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see that. It's like this brownish color texture. I mean, it doesn't taste great, but it's not horrible at the same time. And then of course we have lion's mane. I'm using it similar to Rhodiola Rosea in like a dose early afternoon and then a dose in the later afternoon of 300 milligrams. This is the 8-to-1 mushroom extract. What you're likely to find from lion's mane is you'll be more curious. You'll find you're able to have like deeper connections with people, deeper conversation. Along with that though, my experience and a lot of people using it have also experienced a immediate reduction in anxiety and like symptoms of depression. It's a very strong mood booster. You'll find yourself more present at work. Let's say if something bad happens, you're more likely to see like the brighter side of things. And that's why I would rate this nootropic highly. Although with this nootropic stack, its particular use is with respect to mood, because as far as you generally being more curious and seeing things with more depth and being like the philosopher with this nootropic, it doesn't really work with modafinil and phenylpiracetam, because these are very strong stimulants that can somewhat overpower a lot of the nootropics that you take. So because of that, really the way I'm using lion's mane is just for the mood boost, because it still does work. Because with modafinil, I mean for me anyway, this stuff makes me slightly more anxious, and I find it a little bit difficult to make deep connections with people and really relate to them, be a good listener, and have good social skills. One of the ways that I would make this particular nootropic stack work for me is by practicing intermittent fasting. And I don't recommend it, but if you're somebody that is used to having like a small feeding window, like a lot of people skip breakfast, they maybe skip their lunch and then they go and have like a big dinner in the later portion of the day, that's where the stack really shines. That's what makes this nootropic stack appropriate, and that's why it at least works for me, because there of course are some nootropics where you have to have them with food or some calories or maybe some fats in order to get the most out of them, or if you don't eat with them then you just feel horribly fatigued. But for the most part, this nootropic will help you fast, because a lot of the nootropics are somewhat appetite suppressing, like Rhodiola Rosea, modafinil, and phenylpiracetam. And then of course you just have the energy to go through with the day, and then you have so much focus and so much motivation to achieve your goals that you really wouldn't want to eat anyway, because a lot of the times we're just kind of eating out of boredom. And I'm a sincere believer that for those of you who think there are nootropics that must be taken with a meal or with a fat because they're fat soluble. I would try it on a fasted state because you'll find they're pretty much just as effective. Like even with Aniracetam, a lot of theory is out there that you must take it with a fat source for it to be helpful. Hasn't been my experience, but I'd be curious to know if that's yours. If that's so, then comment below. But guys, I am really committed to trying to grow this channel as much as I can. I appreciate your support. The more this thing grows, the more inclined I am to make better content for you. So be sure to share this video with anyone else you may know who would find it helpful. And I'm going to end this video talking about modafinil, the 8 benefits. I think you may find this helpful, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. Going through the whole process now, I take it very strategically. There are most days when I don't take it, but it is just a great tool to have in your arsenal. For the record, I'm actually on modafinil now. I took it this morning. Here's a prescription just to give you an idea as far as what the pill looks like. So this is an example of what the pill looks like over here.